Sorry guys, let me try again. Seems to me it's not working. Whoop. Are we okay here? I don't see any, let me try over. Let me get back to the presentation here. I'm just gonna come back to this and go through, run through this a little faster. So it's saying basically children acquire languages very quickly and very well up to maybe age 7, after which it drops systematically, and that's what Patricia Kuhl advocates, and it's part of what is the critical period hypothesis. And sorry, the video didn't turn out too well, but main idea here, I guess, is children, when they're young, they are able to hear the full range of sounds and of various languages. But as they get used to certain languages, for example, if they get used to English or they get used to Japanese, then their ears become, I guess, customized to hearing those sounds better. So in English, for example, there's the R and the L, whereas in Japanese there's a sort of a hybrid R. We're called the Japanese R, and the sounds that they occupy are on the sound spectrum are different, and they sort of divide up like that, and then your ears become less accustomed to hearing one or the other sounds. So the basics of the sounds of different languages are shown here on this graph. So they occupy different zones in the whole spectrum, the spectrum that humans can hear. And if you are, for example, a Japanese speaker, it would be on the low end, and if you're an English speaker, it would be on the high end. And they sort of don't overlap, so you have more difficulty deciphering each other's what sounds from each other's languages if you're a monolingual Japanese speaker or a monolingual English speaker. So various languages. So if you speak, for example, Russian, then it's you have a little more advantage because it goes across the range, for example. So when you're young and you can speak various languages that cover different zones, the theory goes that you will have good hearing that allows you to hear better and to keep this ability later in life. And that allows you to pick up good accents, and of course accents per se will can increase confidence, social integration, and there's even some studies that say it increases trustworthiness. But of course accents is secondary to the contents of the vocabulary and whatnot, but it's something important, I think. So I was saying a second point about starting early is self-consciousness. So kids, they are able to learn very quickly because, well, they don't know about themselves. They don't know about their consciousness. They're not afraid, and they just go on and learn and learn and learn. So this is a good time, before mental blocks develop, before we are self-conscious about making mistakes and all that. So this is a good time to start. Very quickly, many studies have shown brain benefits of being bilingual, multilingual. Density, gray matter density is higher, for example. Resistance to mental decline. Learning in general, being able to do multitask, or do complex thinking, and increase communication skills. These are all documented and referenced through many of the scientific literature. And finally, so opportunity costs. This is what I was talking about earlier. If you start early, when you still have a lot of time, you're still absorbing, you're learning a lot, and you can just pick up languages at the same time, well, it saves you a lot of time later when you're actually quite busy and you have to study whatever else you have to study, whether it's biology or medicine or whatever, or work. Then your time becomes more precious. And I mean, other than what we were talking about earlier, if you have more advantages of learning it early, in terms of your ability to pick up languages, good accents and whatnot. Okay. So just before we get into examples, videos of my kids, one last thing, just very quickly on what are the two main theories that our family uses to teach, well, to raise our kids to become multilingual. So the first one is OPO. Many of you probably know this abbreviation as one parent language. In our home, one parent does not suffice, so for us it's more one person, one language. We have very many people with different languages, while speaking to our kids in different languages. Now, CLAP is an acronym that I made up. I call it Contextual Language Acquisition Philosophy, but it's just a complex way of saying something that many people already advocate, and which is to build language learning into your daily life, build a context for learning languages naturally, whether it's reading or playing with friends or watching TV and whatnot. Okay, so just very simple. It's one person, one language, and then building language learning elements into your daily life. That's all we do at our home. Not a lot of very technical stuff. Not whether it's flashcards, I think Dolman method, or there's a lot of things out there that people do, and which I'm sure are very beneficial. At our home, I guess we don't work in the language area, nor are we professional translators or anything related to languages. So I guess we've had to keep it very simple, so that it doesn't disrupt our how would I say, normal life, I guess. So let me get in. This is the main character. So Ronnie is my son. He is now 4 years old. And this picture has nothing to do with languages. I just thought it was a nice picture of him rollerblading in Nagasaki. That's where my wife is from. Okay, so again, OPO. One person, one language. This is the core OPO staff for Ronnie. If you see, he uses these 5 languages on a daily basis. We're talking Japanese, Mandarin, French, English, and Spanish. Now, Japanese, so my wife is Japanese, my mother is Japanese, so talking to mom and grandma would be in Japanese exclusively. I am responsible for Mandarin, and my father, also from Taiwan, so we speak to the children in Mandarin exclusively. Now, my French, well, we live in Quebec, so French is a no-brainer, but I've put here Ronnie's best friend, Axel. Of course, they always talk in French, and they go to the daycare in French. And English. So we have an au pair, her name is Caroline, and she would speak to the children exclusively in English. And we have another au pair, Andrea from Mexico, who would speak to the children exclusively in Spanish. So that's the crew. The kids are here. This is so Ronnie, Nika's 3 years old, and our latest arrival, Akila. Akila is now almost going on 3 months old. So some examples of kids of my kids using 5 languages. The timing is right. It's now Chinese New Year. This, let me show you Ronnie saying,
Oh, no, no. 今天是好日子，你要跟大家说什么？新年快乐！哎，日本語では？明けましておめでとう。Hey, what is it in English? Happy New Year. En français? Bonne année. Oui. Y en español? Feliz Año Nuevo. Yeah, bravo. High five. Oh, no, no.
okay, so there's the 5 languages. It's a very quick demonstration. It says Happy New Year in the 5 languages. So Ronnie, present his little background. He's only 4, but he's also has 3 phases in his life already. He was born in Nagasaki in July. And since birth, I've always spoken to him in Mandarin, and my wife always in Japanese. So, by the time he was starting to mumble a little bit, a few words here and there, we moved to Taiwan. So my wife was studying in Nagasaki. So before we came back to Canada, well, we had already made plans to come back to Canada, but before coming back, I figured I could take him to Taiwan and get him to strengthen his Mandarin before we come back, since he spent 2 years, almost 2 years, in Japan. We went to Taiwan, where I still have family and friends, and we sent him to an American daycare, kind of like how I went to an American school when I was a kid, and introduced English at this point. So by the time he was 36 months old, so by the time he was 3, he had these 3 languages: Japanese, Mandarin, and English. And we came back to Quebec in 2015, where he started to learn French at the daycare. And as I said, we've introduced Spanish by employing au pairs. Okay, we also got another au pair for English a little bit later. This is more like 2016. So Japanese, Mandarin first, then we added English, then we added French and Spanish when he was 3, and this is how he got to be speaking these 4 languages currently. So he's 4 as it stands. He's 4.5 right now. Some more examples. So Ronnie's learning to do some, starting to learn some language, colors. So 2 years old, 2 years 3 months.
Black. Black. There you go. Black. Black. Where's black? Black. Oh, now look at it. Orange. Orange. Wow. Look at it. Green. Green.
So now this is output.
跟爸比讲什么颜色？绿色。绿色。哦，那跟妈咪讲是什么颜色？
So this one was about identifying colors. Let me find one where he identifies some body parts. Where is that video? Okay.
芭比的眼睛在哪里？芭比的头在哪里？啊，芭比的耳朵在哪里？耳朵。那芭比的 mouth eyes。じゃあ鼻は鼻。頭。イエーイ。耳。それ目ね。
So 2 years old, we can see that he can recognize inputs. So when I asked him to find the green crayon, he'll pick up the green. When I ask him to pick up the black crayon, he'll pick up the black. And of course, with different languages as a test. And I can also ask him, what color is this? Or which body part is this? Then he will say that name. So that's the output itself. So starting from 2, they've already started to recognize a little bit of which languages and start to answer in the language that they're being asked in. So here's something, a peculiar thing happens when when they start to learn different languages at the same time. Many people are concerned about this. Okay, wonder if anybody can understand this little sentence that Ronnie said. So, I want bala taberu. So, basically, I want, okay. Bala is guava in Mandarin. And taberu is the verb to eat in Japanese. In Japanese, we put the verb at the end. So, in one sentence, other than the exclamation, the little sound. So he's got 1, 2, 3, 4 words, and he's used three languages in that. Now this is called code switching. So many parents are worried about code switching. They think the children are confused. They think the children they think it's a burden to the children to have to do these different languages, and confuses them. Well, we know for a fact that this clears up. It's been my experience when I grew up. It's been the experience I see that with my kids, and it's also documented in the literature. So this is really not an issue, and I'm not worried about it, and I don't think anybody should worry about it. Okay, so moving right along with more examples. Now we are around March 2015. He is starting to get more, starting to be able to tell time. He's still 2 years old. Here's an example of him telling time and being able to respond to the different languages I ask him in. It's Mandarin.
What time is this?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock.
What time is this?
10 o'clock. 7 o'clock. 10 o'clock.
So automatic responses in the language that he's being asked in shows that he now knows which he's starting to build some channels in his head, starting to recognize very clearly what is being asked in what language. Now, as I said a little bit later in that year, at the end of July, we all came back to Canada in Quebec, and that's when we introduced Spanish. We had invited an au pair from Mexico. Her name was Angelica, and she came to live with us on August 7th. I'll remember this like yesterday. So here's a clip from August 14th, so exactly 1 week into her stay, and this is what we see. Okay, so in 1 week, we are seeing Ronnie start to count numbers in Spanish. In 1 week, this is a 3-year-old. I think that was very encouraging for us, seeing that he's not refusing to learn. In fact, he became acquainted with the au pair very quickly and just started absorbing Spanish extremely quickly. So with that, we build in the language learning elements and opportunities in our daily life. So that we're talking about CLAP, contextual language acquisition philosophy. Anything they do, whether it's school, friends, reading. These are Mandarin books. Or we have Spanish books, we have French books and whatnot. Joining sporting teams. These are all chances for them to interact with other people. This is his little cousin in Japan. So any type of hobby, rollerblading, horseback riding. When you do a horseback riding lesson, you have to get instructions, right? So there's always interaction with other people. Depending on what you do, and it's all fun. For them, it's just fun. They just have to use the languages that they're learning depending on who they're interacting with. Okay, and family. Clearly, we have a special circumstance whereby we have family in Taiwan, we have family in Japan, and we also use technology. So we're living in Canada, but we get to talk to our aunt, my aunt, which is a great aunt to Ronnie, through Skype. This is another opportunity to use his Mandarin all the time. And yeah. So I think I'm nearing the end of my talk. This is something we want to reach as soon as possible. This is really when you think Opal is working. This is the holy grail. Don't get distracted. Okay, don't get distracted. Don't get distracted. He's been speaking Spanish for the past minute. He comes out, talks to mommy who's on Skype right now. I'm holding the camera. And I speak to him in Mandarin. He comes back right away in Mandarin. So this, let me get back to my. So this little clip was taken in October. Remember, Angelica only came in August, so he's already speaking pretty good Spanish in 2 months. And not only that, we had my wife on Skype from Japan, and I was holding the camera, and I spoke in Mandarin, and he switched around in these 3 languages seamlessly, very fluidly. And this is really where we want to get to, for them to be able to switch around in these languages without any hesitation. All they do is they see who they're talking to, and they switch. There's no translation per se in their heads. They're speaking to themselves in Spanish when they're talking to somebody in Spanish. It's direct. Okay, so it's clear that channels have been established, and they are switching around very, very seamlessly. Okay, so this is my last slide. For me, it's a little message, I guess, for all the parents out there. I would really encourage you all to give your children the gift of the world. It's what my parents have given me. There's no way I can pay back, but I can pay it forward, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Raising my kids pretty much the same way that my parents raised me, with, I guess, doing it earlier even for certain steps, and fixing a few gaps that perhaps was there, that was not available in the 70s when I grew up. Today we have a lot more opportunities, for example, au pairs, for example, the technologies, all these we are taking advantage to give our own children the best of this world. They have all the capacities, so I guess it's important for all the parents to know that they have what it takes to raise the children to become multilinguals, to become polyglots, and obviously the children themselves are absolutely capable and able to learn as many things as you throw at them, even at a very, very young age. Okay, so I will turn the camera around, entertain. Are any? See a few people online. My time is, I think, coming up, so just a few minutes, I guess. Ryuxi, a bit late. Let me see, am I seeing the comments? I hope so. I'm not seeing any comments. So I think I can wrap pretty soon. Jimmy, are you online? Oh, I got a question here, I guess, from John. I don't know when this was. Has Ronnie started reading yet? If he does, no. Well, yes. Does not get confused by that. I mean, his reading is very elementary at this time. In Japanese it would be a, u, e, o, and he can read the alphabet in the 3 languages that based on the alphabet. He does not read any popomofo in Mandarin because I've not taught him. I read some books in Mandarin to him, but these are all characters, and it's a little tough for him at 4 years old. Hope that answers your question. Do we have any other comments? If not, I could show you some other clips, I guess, of Ronnie, since I have a few minutes. For example, when I was talking about learning while doing stuff that you love. Let me turn.
Lolo, Lolo.
This is in Taiwan.
Hey, what color? Yellow 是什么颜色？黄色。哪里咯 ？Yes。好来。哎呦，你好棒哦！好。好来。好来，这什么颜色？哎，这什么颜色？咖啡色。What color? What color is it? Brown. 哪里咯？哎，这个茶色。啊，来。来。来。哇！哎呦！哎，来。
All right.
Hey, what color is this?
And also, I was talking about accents. So, at this age, they hear very clearly different accents. So, for example, here he is teaching his aunt in Japan how to count with good accent in English. Oh no, in Mandarin. So you can hear the tones. His pronunciation per se is still very childish, but he hears the tones, the 4 tones in Mandarin very clearly, and teaching to his Japanese aunt. And let's see. There's also one where he where is it here? Hang on. I do not see it here. Oops, sorry about that. So this is, I guess, the example where I was talking about how they are. Well, they have very good pronunciation and teaching adults very much how to pronounce certain words. And I'll end with, I guess, a relatively recent. This is still more than a year ago. So he's counting in the 5 languages. So it's Mandarin. Last one in Spanish. All right, so that's it. I will turn this around again and see if there's. Let me see if there's other questions. Do you believe that? So I have a question from. Oh, hang on. There was a few. Let's see. The latest one is from Pedro. And do you believe that children can learn better than adults? Okay. This is probably an eternal debate. Depends on what you're looking for. I think they can learn better accents than adults, most likely. They can probably acquire languages better than adults. Well, there's no way for me to prove it, but when I say acquire, I mean really learn it, I guess, almost I would say biologically or physiologically. If you read anything from Stephen Krashen, he makes a distinction between acquiring and learning. So if you learn a language, you're basically doing the grammar, you're learning the theory, you're learning the mechanics of a language. Whereas he says if you're acquiring a language, it's more of a intuitive, biological. I don't know. I guess if I speak from experience, I would say that I had learned various languages growing up as a child. So I've explained this a little bit at the beginning. So I've done Mandarin, Japanese, English, Hakka, which is a dialect in Taiwan, and Taiwanese. So this is by the time I was 6, I was exposed to these 5 languages. I had not spoken Hakka and Taiwanese and Mandarin for, I would say, maybe 10, 12 years after I came back after I came to Canada at age 13. No, in fact, more than that. Age 13, so I went back when I was 29. So 16 years without any significant exposure to Mandarin, and definitely not Hakka and Taiwanese. But I still speak them to the level that I spoke when I left Taiwan. And I think that's really because I learned them when I was young and I acquired them. Whereas I studied German and Italian, I guess academically at the university, and I got my A's, intermediate German, intermediate Italian, but I can't say that I speak them as well as I spoke when I first finished the course. In fact, I don't think I ever achieved a very high level in these 2 languages. I just sort of, I can have tea or have a dinner with somebody and maybe try to get by. But I got my grades. So that's, I guess, a distinction I would really make between adults and children. However, there is, I do agree that adults could probably learn faster in a more condensed way, more theoretically. They can, do it more efficiently. So I wouldn't, say that a child would be able to do the fluent in 3 months thing. So they can definitely pick it up very quickly, relatively speaking, and they can probably do it well. And again, children, the amount of vocabulary that they use when they're kids are obviously limited. So they repeat the same things over and over, very, and that I think is probably one way for them to pick up their age standardized level of language quickly. Whereas adults, you would need to there's a higher complexity in the language that would in what is expected from adults. All right, so I don't know if this is if this answers your question. Let me see. Jimmy says, "What is your future plan for you and your children in relation to languages? Why did you teach your children languages and make them polyglots?" Well, the second question is very easy to answer because I've lived through that myself, and the languages that I speak cover, from a population perspective and from a I guess I sort of think practically from a career standpoint, also, I think Japanese, Mandarin, English, French, and Spanish, these cover a very large part of the world from a business perspective, from a population perspective, I mean, economical perspective. So these are important languages that I have acquired by chance, by fate, and also Spanish. I mean, I studied, but most of them really by fate. And I cannot thank my parents enough for the advantages that it's given me in my life, and for the fun that it's given me in my life. So definitely this is the reason for me to pass it on and have my children learn languages. Okay, and your first question was, what is the future plan for my children? It's basically the same. I don't, again, like I've mentioned this in my talk, I don't do a lot of the how would I say, academic exercises. It's really about creating an environment where they need to speak the languages naturally. So have the individual people, or each person who's responsible for the languages, and let them switch around with the languages. We want to go as far as we can with this. I think if they get into their to their teens with this method, I think it will stick for the rest of their lives. It will be mission accomplished for me. Like I had learned Mandarin, Hakka, and these the Mandarin dialects in Taiwan until I was 13, and it was enough for it to stick. Keep my ears open to all the languages that I learned later in life, and I think that allowed me to get a good accent in all the languages that I speak, even more than perhaps the depth of the language itself. So we'll continue like this for as long as we can go. Do you expect? I have questions from people who say, do you expect your children to rebel against the languages that you're teaching? And yeah, maybe. I do expect that it will come around someday. I hope later, and most likely it'll be in a phase. I probably had that when I was young also, but turned around and realized the value of what my parents were giving me. So my kids, hope they're smart enough. They will realize. But even then, I just hope to get it as far as I can so that it sticks and it doesn't, go to waste. It doesn't, they don't forget it. So let me check out the questions. What do I have? So Tatiana asking, is it easier for a Hispanic person or Anglophone to learn an Asian language such as Mandarin or Japanese? Well, it's interesting that you say that. When I was learning Spanish, I had, and I was in Ecuador for the first time. I went to Ecuador to visit a friend of mine. The locals told me, wow, you speak Japanese. You must be able to learn Spanish very quickly. And fair enough. I think Spanish and Japanese, in this sense, I think are similar in that they, in my opinion, they have pretty simple, I guess, phonetics, simple accents. The words are usually spelled consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel. It's very easy to pronounce, and it's pronounced the way it's written. So I guess a Hispanic would probably be able to pick up Japanese in terms of pronunciation relatively easily. But I don't know if that holds true for grammar and whatnot. I've not learned Japanese, intellectually or academically, so I wouldn't know. By the time I knew myself as a living being, I guess I already spoke Japanese, so I don't really know what it means to learn Japanese. All right. and French. Okay, so here's a follow-up from Tatiana. So what about French? So I'm assuming that means if you already speak French, is it easier for you to speak other languages, including Asian? I think French is a very complex language in terms of grammar and pronunciation. So exactly the opposite of what I was saying about Spanish. In that French, pretty much nothing is written is pronounced the way it's written. It's a lot of silent letters. The way the grammar is structured is highly complex. They call it analyse logique, which I think is in fact very logical, but you need to really get into the deep end before you can really apply and speak correctly, at least from a grammatical perspective. So I think just by having overcome all those obstacles, if you, as a French speaker, it becomes already easier to speak other languages. But I'm biased because I learned French when I was quite young. But one analogy that comes up a lot is it easier to be a French speaker and learn Spanish, or be a Spanish speaker and learn French? And my opinion is that it's probably easier to learn Spanish when you already know French, given the complexities in the grammar and the pronunciation and whatnot. Does that apply to Asian languages? I don't know. I don't. The other way, maybe, if you already speak Mandarin, which is also very complex in terms of pronunciation, maybe because I spoke Mandarin before I came to Quebec, I was able to hear more of the intricacies in French and be able to pick it up quite quickly when I came here. Possibly. It's all speculation, since I've not studied it academically. All right, let me refresh my screen here and see if there are any final questions. If not, I will wrap and say thank you all for hearing me out. Thank you for your questions. They're very pertinent, very relevant, very interesting. And I hope I was able to answer your questions. I hope the presentation was okay, sort of custom-made screen here. I couldn't figure out how to run the slides directly in Facebook Live. But from the questions, I guess you did hear fairly well. Okay, so I will wrap, and thank you again, and hope to see you someday. Hopefully in Montreal this coming summer. I am organizing with Joey Perugino the Montreal Language Festival. So hopefully you guys will have a chance to come. I will give another talk at that time, and we have some very incredible speakers. I mean, Richard Simcott's coming. We have Steve Kaufman. You all know Steve Kaufman. And folks like Oli, folks like Lindsay, all these names that you know by first name, they're all going to be there. It's going to be a party. And just to give you guys a sneak preview, we're going to have Stephen Crash in there. So definitely check it out. Montreal Language Festival. So check it out. It's at langfest.org. Okay? And you can find it on Facebook also, Language Festival. Thank you. Talk to you later.